No ship appeared on the scanners. No hyperspace signature registered. Yet something fell from the void between stars. Not one vessel, but 7 wooden longships that had no place in the cold vacuum of space. Their dragonhead prows cutting through reality itself, as if the cosmos were simply another sea to conquer. The Imperial outpost on the moon of Tracen registered. The anomaly 3 seconds before wooden hulls, held together by iron rivets and Norwegian pine, crashed into the barren surface, trailing fire and impossible defiance of every physical law the Empire understood. Inside the lead longship, Ragnar Lothbrok gripped the mast as his world turned inside out. One moment, they'd been sailing through a storm, unlike any he'd seen in 20 years of raiding, lightning that burned green instead of white, thunder that sounded like the screaming of giants, waves that seemed to fold reality itself. Floki had laughed maniacally, calling it a sign from the gods. Then the sky had torn open, and they'd fallen through into this. The impact threw Ragnar against the ship's side hard enough to crack ribs. Around him, his warriors cried out, some in pain, others in prayer to Odin and Thor. The ship groaned, timbers that had survived Atlantic storms now stressed by forces they were never meant to endure. Then, impossibly, the groaning stopped. They were still, alive. Ragnar pulled himself up, tasting blood, and looked out at a landscape that made his mind rebel. Rocky ground stretched in all directions under a sky filled with more stars than he'd ever seen, but they were wrong stars, in wrong patterns, and there were too many moons. 3 of them, hanging in the sky like the eyes of giants watching their arrival. Ragnar. Lajertha's voice cut through the confusion. She'd already armed herself, shield and axe ready, blood running from a cut on her forehead. The other ships? He turned to look. 6 more longships had crashed nearby, scattered across the alien terrain like toys thrown by an angry child. Warriors were emerging from them, weapons raised, looking for an enemy to fight because fighting was what Vikings did when faced with the incomprehensible. Bjorn, Ragnar called to his son, who was pulling warriors from the second ship. How many? Most live, Bjorn shouted back, his young face showing the same mixture of fear and excitement that Ragnar remembered from his first raid. Some broken bones, 2 dead from the impact. Father, what? I don't know, Ragnar interrupted, because honesty mattered more than false confidence. He turned to find Floki crawling from the wreckage, the shipbuilder's eccentric face, split by a grin that looked half mad even by his standards. The gods have taken us somewhere new. Floki cackled, spreading his arms wide. Don't you see? This is a gift. New lands to explore, new people to meet, new gods to question. Or we've died. Rollo's deep voice rumbled as Ragnar's brother approached, his massive frame somehow having survived the crash without apparent injury. And this is the path to Valhalla. Ragnar considered that. He'd always wondered what came after death, if the stories of Valhalla were true or just tales to make warriors brave. But no, he could feel his broken ribs, taste blood, feel the cold of this alien place. If we were dead, we wouldn't hurt. We wouldn't bleed. We're alive, brother. Just somewhere else. A strange sound made every Viking freeze, a mechanical whine unlike anything they'd heard. Ragnar's hand went to his axe as shapes appeared on the horizon. They looked like metal beasts, walking on 2 legs, with glowing red eyes. Behind them came men in white armor that covered them completely, carrying strange staffs that hummed with energy. Shield wall, Ragnar commanded, and his warriors responded instantly. 500 Vikings arranged themselves in the formation that had broken Saxon lines and conquered kingdoms. Shields overlapping, weapons ready. It was what they knew, what they trusted. The white-armored figures stopped 50 paces away. One of them, distinguished by an orange shoulder marking, raised a hand and spoke in a language Ragnar didn't recognize. The words were harsh, clipped, carrying the tone of commands. They want something, Lager the observed quietly. But what? Our surrender, Ragnar guessed. He'd heard that tone before from Frankish lords and Saxon kings. The tone of men who believed they held power and expected submission. He stepped forward from the shield wall, hands spread wide but still holding his axe, showing he came to talk but remained ready to fight. The white-armored leader raised one of the strange staffs and fired. The red bolt of energy hit the ground at Ragnar's feet, scorching rock and sending up smoke. A warning shot. Ragnar had seen arrows do similar things. Though these weapons made no bowstring sound and the arrow had been light itself, he understood tactics. These warriors had weapons that struck from distance, like archers, but faster and more deadly judging by the scorch mark. Charging them across open ground would mean death. But Vikings had faced archers before. You closed the distance fast, used shields, made them panic. Ragnar, those weapons, Bjorn started. I see them, Ragnar cut him off. He was already thinking, adapting, planning. Floki, what do you know of this place? Nothing. Floki laughed. Isn't it wonderful? We're ignorant as newborns. The white-armored leader spoke again, louder, more insistent. The other warriors raised their weapons, all pointed at the Vikings. Ragnar counted 20 of them, with more of the two-legged metal beasts behind. His 500 could overwhelm them in close combat, but could his warriors survive? Crossing the distance? He had to know what these weapons could do, had to understand this new enemy. Ragnar caught the eye of Arn, a young warrior whose eagerness always outpaced his wisdom. The boy wanted glory, wanted to prove himself worthy of Valhalla. Ragnar gave him a slight nod, permission. Arn charged with a berserker's cry, shield raised, axe ready. The white-armored warriors fired. 3 red bolts hit Arnie's shield, burning through wood and leather, and 2 more hit him directly. The young Viking fell, smoke rising from holes burned through his body. Dead before he hit the ground. Dead without ever reaching his enemy. Dead without ever swinging his weapon. The Vikings stirred, growling like wolves, but Ragnar raised his hand. Hold, he commanded. His voice carried the authority of a king who'd led his people through impossible odds before. We learn before we die. These weren't arrows. Arrows you could dodge, block, survive. These were something else. But the men carrying them were still just men. Ragnar could see it in how they stood, how they moved. Trained, yes. Disciplined, certainly. But not expecting real resistance. Not expecting warriors who understood that sometimes you had to accept losses to win. What do we do? Bjorn asked quietly. Ragnar studied the situation with the tactical mind that had made him legendary. The white-armored warriors thought. They'd won because they'd killed one man from safety. They didn't know Vikings. Didn't know that every man here had already accepted death as the price of glory. We make them think we surrender, Ragnar said, loud enough for his commanders to hear. Then tonight, when they're confident, when they think us defeated, he smiled. The same smile he'd worn before raiding the monastery at Lindisfarne. We show them what Vikings do to those who think themselves safe. Ragnar laid down his axe slowly, a gesture of temporary submission. Around him, reluctantly, his warriors did the same. The white-armored soldiers advanced, and Ragnar studied everything: how they moved, how they communicated, where their weapons hung, how their armor was sealed. As they bound his wrists with strange metal restraints, Ragnar caught Lagertha's eye. She understood. This wasn't surrender. This was reconnaissance. Vikings didn't just raid blindly. They learned their enemies first. And Ragnar Lothbrok, who'd gone from farmer to king by understanding that every enemy had weaknesses, was already planning how to turn these strange warriors' confidence into their doom. If you want to see more characters enter the Star Wars galaxy, hit that subscribe button and drop the name of a character you'd want to see in the comments below. May the Force be with you. The Imperial Holding Facility on Trason hadn't been designed for prisoners who viewed captivity as tactical opportunity. Lieutenant Voss, the stormtrooper commander, paced before the containment cells watching the primitives with growing unease. They'd surrendered, weapons down, hands up, all standard procedure. But they didn't act defeated. They watched everything with the focused attention of predators studying prey. Sir, one of his troopers reported, the primitives keep testing the energy barriers. Not trying to escape, just touching them, studying them. Voss didn't like it. These raiders had appeared from nowhere, in wooden ships that shouldn't have survived space, wearing armor from some pre-industrial age, carrying axes and swords like museum pieces. But the one they'd identified as the leader, the one with the braided beard and calculating eyes, was no primitive fool. Increase the guard rotation, Voss ordered, and send a full report to Imperial Command. These aren't simple pirates. In the cell, Ragnar pressed his palm against the shimmering barrier one more time, feeling the tingle of energy. noting how it reacted to pressure. It hurt to touch for too long, he'd watched. Floki deliberately keep his hand there until it burned, laughing the whole time, but it was consistent. A wall made of invisible force. Like the god's magic, perhaps, but following rules. It's similar to lightning, Floki observed, cradling his burned hand. Remember the storm that brought us here? This feels like that, but controlled, captured. These people have tamed the power of Thor's hammer. Can it be broken? Lothbrok asked from the adjacent cell. The white-armored warriors had separated men and women, not understanding that shield maidens were warriors equal to any man. Everything can be broken, Ragnar replied. We just need to understand how. Bjorn tested his own restraints, metal, bands around his wrists that somehow held fast without locks or keys. Father, we've been here 3 hours. Eventually they'll either kill us or move us. What's the plan? Ragnar smiled. The plan is that they've already told us everything we need to know. Watch. A white-armored warrior approached Lajertha's cell, carrying what looked like a tray of gray substance. Food, presumably. He deactivated the barrier. Ragnar's eyes caught every movement of his hands. On the control panel, stepped inside, placed the tray, and stepped back out. The barrier reactivated. See, Ragnar said quietly. The wall can be turned off. It requires that panel. And when it's off, even for a moment, there's nothing between us and them but air. We're still unarmed, Rollo pointed out. And those fire weapons they carry will kill us before we can reach them. Then we ensure they don't have time to use them, Ragnar replied. He'd been thinking about this since their capture, analyzing every detail. Rollo, when the guard comes to your cell, provoke him. Make him angry. Make him think you're just another stupid barbarian. When he deactivates the barrier to discipline you, break his neck before he can raise his weapon. And the others? Bjorn asked. Chaos spreads fast in confined spaces. We take weapons from the first guards we kill, use them against the rest. These warriors. Ragnar gestured at the stormtroopers. They're trained. But their training makes them predictable. They follow procedures. We break procedures, they break. Lothbrok nodded understanding. Like the raid on Wessex. When we attacked during their holy day because we knew they'd be in their churches. Unarmed, complacent. Exactly. Ragnar felt the familiar rush of a plan coming together. But first, I need to understand more. Floki, you said their weapons are like lightning. Controlled lightning. Floki interrupted, his burned hand still fascinating him. See, if you can capture the storm, force it into those metal staffs. Make it strike where you point. Can we use them? Ragnar asked bluntly. Floki's eyes lit up. Oh, I don't know. Let's find out. The escape came at the shift change, when protocols got loose and guards got casual. Rollo called the approaching stormtrooper something in Norse that didn't need translation. The tone made the meaning clear. The trooper, young and already frustrated by primitive prisoner duty, did exactly what Ragnar predicted. He entered the cell to teach the savage respect. Rollo's hands were still bound, but Vikings had wrestled bears and fought in shield walls, where inches determined life or death. When the trooper raised his hand to strike, Rollo's bound hands came up and around, the metal restraints becoming a garrote. The trooper's neck broke with a wet crack before he could trigger his weapon. Ragnar counted to 3. That's how long it took for the other guards to register what had happened. That's how long Ragnar needed. He'd been working on his restraints since capture, using a sharp edge he'd found on the cell bench to slowly weaken the metal. They snapped now with a sharp twist, and he was through the deactivated barrier before the alarms even started. The second stormtrooper turned, raising his blaster. But Ragnar was already inside his guard. Vikings trained to fight in close quarters, where hesitation meant death. The trooper's armor was strong but had gaps. Ragnar's fingers found the helmet seal and twisted. The man went down gasping. Then Ragnar had the strange weapon in his hands. It was lighter than he expected, warm to the touch. He'd watched them use it. Point. Squeeze the trigger mechanism. He aimed at the third stormtrooper and fired. The blaster kicked differently than he expected, and his shot went wide, burning a hole in the wall. But the stormtrooper saw a primitive wielding Imperial tech and hesitated, just for a moment, and that moment was all Lothbrok needed. She'd freed herself using Rollo's technique and crashed into the trooper from behind. The facility descended into chaos. More stormtroopers responded to the alarm. But they were responding to a prison break, organized, controlled by the book. They weren't prepared for Vikings. Bjorn led a group that used seized riot shields to create a mobile shield wall, advancing down corridors while captured blasters fired from behind cover. It wasn't pretty, and half their shots missed. But the psychological effect was devastating. Prisoners weren't supposed to fight back with this much coordination and aggression. Ragnar moved through the facility with purpose, not randomly raiding, but seeking something specific. He found it in the armory, their weapons. The white-armored warriors had stored them like artifacts, not understanding that to a Viking, his weapons were extensions of his soul. His axe felt right in his hands again. Familiar. True. The blasters were powerful. Yes, but they lacked weight. Lacked the satisfaction of feeling the impact through your arms when you struck. The exit. Lothbrok called, pointing to a large door. But it's sealed. Floki examined it with the same maniacal curiosity he'd shown everything else. It's locked by these panels, like the cell barriers, but more complex. I need time. We don't have time, Ragnar cut him off. He could hear reinforcements coming. They'd killed maybe 20 of these white-armored warriors. But there had to be more. This was a raid gone wrong. They'd taken the monastery, but couldn't escape with the plunder. Time to adapt. Find another way. Windows, ventilation, anything. Father, Bjorn called from a side corridor. This way leads up. I see Scott. They fought their way to the roof, leaving dead stormtroopers behind them. Ragnar had lost count of how many Vikings had fallen. 15? 20? Each death was a tragedy and an honor. They died with weapons in hand, fighting impossible odds. Valhalla would welcome them. The roof overlooked the Imperial supply depot they'd tried to raid initially. Ragnar could see the layout now from above, warehouses full of unknown goods. Strange flying machines coming and going, and in the distance, one of the enormous metal ships that seemed to be the vessels of this place. We're trapped, Rollo observed. They were surrounded by open ground, with the only cover being the building they'd just escaped from. White-armored warriors were gathering below, and more of the metal war machines were approaching. Ragnar studied the situation and made the calculations that had kept him alive through 20 years of raiding. We can't win this fight. Not here, not now. Then we die here, Bjorn said simply. Better than chains. No, Ragnar countered. Better than chains is living to fight again. Better than dying is learning. He turned to his assembled warriors, maybe 300, still standing, breathing hard, bloodied but unbowed. We came here to raid, to take wealth and glory. But this place. He gestured at the impossible vista of alien technology. This place has rules we don't understand yet, enemies we can't predict. And I'll not waste Viking lives because I'm too proud to admit when I don't know enough. What are you saying? Lothbrok asked, though her expression suggested she already knew. I'm saying we surrender, Ragnar declared. Again, but differently this time. Not as defeated prisoners, but as warriors offering truce. We give ourselves up, but we demand to speak with their leaders, to understand this place, to learn if there's opportunity here for Vikings. They'll just kill us, Rollo growled. Maybe, Ragnar admitted. But I don't think so. They could have killed us already. They have weapons that strike from the sky, machines of war we can't match. But they took us prisoner instead. They studied our ships. They're curious about us, which means we have value. He looked at Floki. You said the gods brought us here for a reason. Maybe this is it. Not to conquer immediately, but to learn first. Floki laughed his unsettling laugh. Ragnar Lothbrok, the farmer who became a king by being curious about what lay west, now curious about what lies in the stars. I like it. The stormtroopers below were calling for their surrender in that harsh language. Ragnar couldn't understand the words, but he understood the situation. He raised his hands, but this time, he kept his axe in one hand, visible, but lowered. A gesture of truce, not defeat. A new figure emerged from the gathered stormtroopers, someone in different armor. Darker, with a cape. An officer or lord of some kind. This one studied the Vikings with the same careful attention Ragnar used to study enemies. That one, Ragnar said quietly. That one thinks. That one might listen. He raised his voice, speaking in Norse, but with the tone that transcended language. The voice of one leader addressing another. I am Ragnar Lothbrok. I come in peace to speak of terms. We are warriors, not murderers. We seek understanding, not slaughter." The dark-armored figure raised a hand, and the stormtroopers lowered their weapons slightly. Not holstered, but not immediately firing. A chance. Ragnar caught Lajertha's eye. "If this goes badly, tell our story. Tell how Vikings faced a new world with courage." "It won't go badly," she replied, "because you're too curious to die before you understand this place. And curiosity has always been your greatest weapon." She was right. Ragnar Lothbrok had survived because he adapted, learned, questioned everything. This galaxy, whatever it was, held secrets worth more than any gold. And he intended to learn them all, even if it killed him. The dark-armored figure removed his helmet, revealing a weathered human face with scars that spoke of combat experience. His name was Captain Thane, commander of the Imperial garrison on Tracen, and he'd been a soldier long enough to recognize the difference between desperate criminals and disciplined warriors. These primitives, Vikings, they called themselves, were the latter. "You understand basic?" Thane asked, though he suspected the answer. Ragnar shook his head but gestured to Floki, who'd been making exaggerated efforts to learn words from their guards. The shipbuilder had picked up perhaps 30 words, enough to communicate in broken fragments. "We learn. You teach. We talk." Ragnar shook his head but gestured to Floki, who'd been making exaggerated efforts to learn words from their guards. The shipbuilder had picked up perhaps 30 words, enough to communicate in broken fragments. "We learn. You teach. We talk." Thane considered. Protocol said to execute raiders who'd killed Imperial personnel, but protocol didn't account for raiders who appeared from nowhere in wooden ships, fought like demons, then offered intelligent parley. And headquarters would want these anomalies studied before they were disposed of. "Lower your weapons," Thane ordered his men. "Slowly, but keep them ready." Over the next 3 hours, through painful pantomime, broken language attempts, and Floki's increasingly frantic drawings in the dirt, a rudimentary communication emerged. The Vikings had come from across the sea space, through a storm of the gods, dimensional rift, and were raiders seeking fortune, pirates, essentially. Ragnar learned key concepts: empire, rulers of many worlds; credits, currency, weapons, blasters; ships, starships; and most importantly, that this galaxy was vast beyond his comprehension. Worlds upon worlds, seas of stars. His mind reeled at the scale, but his curiosity burned brighter. Thane learned that these Vikings were neither stupid nor primitive in mind, only in technology. Their leader thought tactically, adapted quickly, and showed the kind of strategic patience that made him dangerous. When Thane explained through drawings that the Empire controlled thousands of worlds, Ragnar hadn't shown fear. He'd shown interest. "What do you want?" Thane asked through Floki's translation. Ragnar considered the question carefully. What did Vikings want? Wealth, glory, adventure, new lands. But those were means to an end. What they truly wanted was to matter, to be remembered, to write their names in history through deeds that would echo into eternity. "We want." Ragnar struggled with the limited vocabulary: to raid, to fight, to take. "Like you." He gestured at the Imperial garrison. "You take worlds. We take small things. We work together." Thane almost laughed. These primitives wanted to join the Empire as mercenaries? It was absurd. But then again, the Empire did employ bounty hunters, mercenaries, local militias. If these Vikings could be controlled, they might have value. Expendable shock troops for situations where stormtroopers were too valuable to risk. Before Thane could respond, a new sound cut through the discussion: the distinctive roar of Mandalorian jetpacks. 3 figures in painted Beskar armor descended from the sky, landing between the Imperial forces and the Vikings with the confidence of warriors who feared nothing. The lead Mandalorian's armor was painted in red and black, his helmet bearing the distinctive T-visor that made his kind legendary across the galaxy. When he spoke, his voice carried through his helmet's vocoder with authority. "Captain Thane, these warriors are to be released to Mandalorian custody immediately." Thane's hand moved toward his blaster. "By whose authority?" "Recognize other warriors when we see them." The Mandalorian gestured at the Vikings. "These are fighters, not Imperial prisoners, not pirates. Warriors." Ragnar watched this new development with fascination. The 3 in colored metal armor moved, differently than the white-armored soldiers, more fluid, more confident, more like Vikings actually. And they'd come specifically for his people, which meant something. You speak our language? Ragnar asked in Norse, testing. The Mandalorian's helmet turned toward him. No, but I speak the language of warriors. And your people have it written in every scar and stance. He switched back to basic for Thane. These primitives killed 20 stormtroopers in close quarters combat using captured weapons they'd never seen before. They organized a breakout that should have been impossible, and their leader had the wisdom to offer truce rather than die. Pointlessly, he paused. That's not primitive. That's Mandalorian. They're criminals, Thane protested. They're raiders who didn't know they were raiding an Imperial facility. No declaration of war. No political affiliation. At worst, it's unauthorized salvage. The Mandalorian's voice carried amusement. And at best, it's the kind of warriors Mandalore hasn't seen in generations. Thane knew when he was outmaneuvered politically. The Mandalorians had diplomatic status in this sector. And if they claimed these prisoners as potential recruits or cultural interests, Imperial authority became complicated. Take them, but they're your responsibility. Any more raids, any more Imperial deaths, it falls on Mandalore. Understood. The Mandalorian turned to Ragnar. Through hand gestures and the few words Floki had learned, he communicated, "Come, we take you, teach you, show you this galaxy." Ragnar studied these armored warriors with intense interest. They reminded him of the berserkers, warriors, who'd earned legendary status through deeds and courage. And they wanted to teach Vikings? That was an opportunity worth more than any plunder. We go with them, Ragnar decided, and his warriors followed without question. That was the Viking way. Trust your leader's instincts, even into the unknown. The Mandalorian vessel was called the KYR Bess, a Comar K-class fighter/transport that looked like a predator even sitting still. As Ragnar and 50 of his warriors, all Thane would release, boarded, Ragnar touched the metal hull with something approaching reverence. This was a ship that sailed between stars, a longship for the heavens themselves. The lead Mandalorian removed his helmet once they were aboard, revealing a scarred face that could have belonged to any Viking warrior, the look of someone who'd survived battles that should have killed them. His name was Jemus, and he belonged to Clan Rook. "Why did you take us?" Ragnar asked through increasingly effective pantomime and the few Mandalorian words Floki was already trying to learn. Jemus gestured at the weapons the Vikings still carried. "You fight with blades, with axes, with shields, in a galaxy where everyone relies on blasters and technology." He tapped his Beskar chest plate. "Mandalorians understand. Sometimes old ways are best ways. We've kept our traditions alive for thousands of years. You," he studied. "Ragnar, you could do same. If you learn, if you adapt, if you're strong enough. What do you want from us?" Lager, they asked. She'd learned to be suspicious of anyone offering help without price. "To see if you're worthy," Jemus replied simply. "Mandalore needs warriors. Real warriors, not Imperial conscripts or mercenaries who fight only for credits. If you prove worthy, you could join clans. Adopt our creed. Become Mandalorian. And if we're not worthy?" Bjorn challenged. Jemus smiled. The smile of a warrior who'd issued and received similar challenges. "Then you die in the attempt, and die honored. Better than dying as Imperial prisoners." Ragnar liked this Jemus. Direct. Honest. A warrior who understood that honor and pragmatism weren't contradictory. "You said you'd teach us this galaxy. Show us how to survive here." "Yes. But first," Jemus pulled up a holographic display that showed the Outer Rim territories. "You need to understand what you've walked into. This galaxy is at war. Empire controls most systems through fear and force. Some resist, rebels, they're called. Most just try to survive. And in the spaces between," he highlighted several sectors, "there are opportunities for those brave or foolish enough to take them." "Raiding opportunities," Ragnar translated. "Exactly. But raiding in this galaxy means different things. Not just taking gold and slaves. Information, technology, resources that don't exist in your old world. And the targets," Jemus grinned, "are far richer than any Saxon monastery." Floki laughed his unsettling laugh. "The gods brought us to a paradise of pillaging." Over the next days, as the KYR Bess traveled to Mandalore, Jaemus and his warriors taught Vikings the basics of galactic survival. They learned that blasters had limited ammunition called power packs. That armor came in many types, some resistant to blades, some not. That space travel required specific vessels and routes. That droids were thinking machines, not possessed objects. But more importantly, Ragnar learned philosophy. Mandalorian culture, centered on the Risol Nair, the 6 actions that define their people. Wearing armor, speaking the language, defending yourself and your family, raising children as Mandalorians, contributing to the clan. When called, rallying to Mandalore's cause. It wasn't so different from Viking culture. Warriors defined by deeds, family and clan above individual, glory through combat. Even the armor, Mandalorians wore Beskar. Vikings wore iron and leather. But both understood that a warrior's armor told his story. You could become Mandalorian, Jaemus explained to Ragnar privately. Not losing your Viking identity, but adding to it. We have many clans from many worlds. Mandalorian isn't a race, it's a creed. A choice. Ragnar considered this. To become part of something larger. To have the knowledge and resources of this galaxy's fiercest warriors. To raid not just for survival, but as part of a legendary tradition that spanned stars. But Vikings had their own traditions. Their own gods. Their own way. If we join you, Ragnar said carefully, do we forsake the gods? Forsake Odin and Thor? Jaemus shook his head. Mandalorians believe in Manda, the collective soul of our people. Some worship old gods. Some worship new ones. Some worship nothing. What matters is the creed, not who you pray to when you fight. That decided it for Ragnar. A warrior culture that valued deeds over dogma? That honored tradition while adapting to new circumstances? That sounded like something Vikings could embrace. We'll try your way, Ragnar announced to Jaemus. Teach us to be Mandalorian. But we remain Vikings in spirit. Can both things be true? Ask yourself this, Jaemus replied. Can a warrior be from one world but fight in another? Can old ways survive in new times? Can tradition adapt without dying? He clasped Ragnar's forearm in the warrior's grip. If the answer is yes, then you're already thinking like Mandalorian. The KYR Bess approached Mandalore, a world that had known war and survived it. Their people scattered across the stars, but united by shared creed. As Ragnar saw the planet below, he felt something he hadn't felt since leaving Norway. The sense of coming to a place where warriors were honored, where strength and skill mattered more than birth or politics. But before they could land, the ship's sensors detected something. Multiple vessels on approach vector. Imperial signatures. They're not here for us, Jaemus said, reading the tactical display. But we're about to witness something. The Empire raids Mandalorian worlds sometimes. Testing us. Seeing if we'll break. And do you? Ragnar asked. Jaemus's smile was all teeth. Watch and learn, Viking. Below, Mandalorian starfighters were already launching to intercept the Imperial probe, and Ragnar watched his first space battle, with the eyes of someone who understood that war was war, regardless of whether it happened on seas or between stars. The tactics were different, the weapons were different, but the principle remained: defend what's yours. Strike fast. Make them bleed for every inch. The Imperials withdrew after losing 3 TIE fighters to Mandalorian Fong fighters. A probing attack, Jaemus explained. Testing defenses. Sending messages. The Empire and Mandalore had an uneasy relationship. Not quite war. Not quite peace. This happens often, Ragnar asked. Often enough. The Empire fears us, respects us, leaves us mostly alone. But they test. Always testing. Ragnar understood that too. Strong neighbors tested each other. Kings sent raiders to probe defenses. You showed strength or you showed weakness, and weakness invited conquest. If we become Mandalorian, Ragnar said slowly, we'd fight the Empire? These warriors with their fire weapons and starships. When necessary, Jaemus confirmed. But Mandalorians choose battles carefully. We don't serve Empire or rebels. We serve ourselves, our clans, our honor. Independent, Ragnar translated. Like Viking jarls who owed allegiance to no king. Exactly, as they descended toward Mandalore's surface. Toward cities built by warriors who'd survived catastrophe and remained unbroken. Ragnar Lothbrok made a decision that would change not just his fate, but the fate of every Viking who'd fallen through the storm with him. They would learn this galaxy's ways. They would take the Mandalorian creed, not as surrender, but as evolution. Vikings had always adapted, always survived by being willing to change tactics while keeping their warrior hearts. And if this galaxy wanted to see what happened when Norse raiders learned to fight among the stars, Ragnar would show them, with blade and blaster, with longship and starship, with the fury of berserkers and the discipline of Mandalorians. The galaxy wouldn't forget the Vikings. He'd make sure of it. 6 months. That's how long it took for Ragnar Lothbrok and his Vikings to transform from medieval raiders into something the galaxy had never seen, warriors who combined Norse berserker fury with Mandalorian tactical doctrine, who wielded both ancient axes and modern blasters, who painted their Beskar armor with dragon head designs and Thor's hammer symbols. The Mandalorians called them Dha Kardath, forgotten warriors, a name that stuck because it honored both what they'd been and what they'd become. Ragnar's 50 Vikings had been split among 3 clans for training. Clan Rook took Ragnar, Bjorn, and Lagertha. Clan Vizsla accepted Rollo and 20 of the largest warriors. Clan Ren welcomed Floki and the more technical-minded raiders who wanted to understand this galaxy's machines. The training had been brutal. Mandalorian instructors didn't coddle, didn't accept excuses, and didn't care that Vikings had been legendary in their own world. Here, you proved yourself or you died. Simple as that. Ragnar learned to fire a blaster with accuracy that surprised even Jemus. His years of throwing axes and spears translated well to ranged weapons once he understood the principles. Bjorn took to jetpack combat with the reckless enthusiasm of youth, treating aerial maneuvers like boarding actions from different angles. Lagertha discovered that Mandalorian combat doctrine emphasized tactical flexibility over brute strength, which suited her perfectly. But they kept their axes, their swords, their shields, because Jemus had been right. In close quarters, when technology failed or ammunition ran out, old ways proved their worth. And Mandalorians respected that. Beskar could stop blaster bolts, but a well-placed axe strike to an unarmored joint still killed. Now, standing in the briefing room of Clan Rook's compound on Mandalore, Ragnar studied the holographic display showing their first real mission as Dha Karta. Raid an Imperial Star Destroyer. You're insane, Rollo observed, though his grin suggested he approved of the insanity. Even for you, brother, this is madness. Maybe, Ragnar admitted. But hear the plan before you judge. Jemus manipulated the hologram, showing the Star Destroyer's layout. The inexorable A. Victory-class destroyer doing patrol runs through the Mandalore sector. Standard crew complement, standard security. And carrying something Clan Rook needs. Beskar ingots confiscated from mining operations in the Outer Rim. The Empire steals our metal, another Mandalorian named Isa explained, her voice tight with anger. Melts it down for their own purposes. This shipment is worth millions of credits, but more importantly, it's ours. Our culture, our heritage. So we take it back, Bjorn said simply. Vikings understood theft recovery through violence. That was basically what every raid was. Taking back wealth that someone else currently possessed. The challenge, Jemus continued, is that Star Destroyers aren't designed to be boarded. They expect attacks from starfighters, other capital ships, not from boarding parties using unconventional insertion, which is where Vikings come in, Ragnar finished. Understanding clicking into place. You need warriors who think differently, who see opportunities where others see walls. Exactly. Mandalorians have tried boarding actions before. Sometimes they work. Usually they don't. But Vikings. Jemus gestured at Ragnar's people, now armored in customized Beskar that somehow managed to look both Mandalorian and distinctly Norse. You've spent your entire lives boarding vessels. It's what you do. Ragnar studied the hologram with the tactical mind that had made him legendary. Star Destroyers were massive, over 1 kilometer long, bristling with weapons, carrying thousands of personnel. But ships were ships, whether they sailed on water or through space. They had crews. They had blind spots. They had points where attackers could gain advantage if they were willing to pay the price. Floki, Ragnar called to his shipbuilder, who'd been suspiciously quiet. You've been studying their vessels. What have you learned? Floki's eyes lit with manic excitement. Oh, so much. These ships are wonders, Ragnar, but they're also predictable. See, they're designed by people who think in straight lines. In procedures, in protocols, they have armor everywhere they expect. Attacks, but not everywhere. He manipulated the hologram, highlighting specific points. These sensor arrays, these docking bays, these maintenance hatches, all designed assuming attackers use standard tactics, standard weapons, standard thinking. And we're anything but standard, Lothbrok observed. The Empire's weakness, Jemus said, is that they've been fighting the same kind of war. For so long they've forgotten. Other kinds exist. They prepare for starfighter assaults and capital ship engagements. Not for warriors with jetpacks, grappling hooks, and the willingness to crawl across a ship's hull in vacuum. Ragnar felt the familiar rush of a good plan forming. We use what they don't expect. Small insertion team, 30 warriors, mixed Viking and Mandalorian. We approach using that debris field. He pointed at the hologram showing a nearby asteroid cluster, hiding our signatures. When the Star Destroyer passes, we attach to the hull using magnetic clamps, cut through into the maintenance sections, and fight our way to the cargo hold. While avoiding or killing several thousand stormtroopers, Rollo added dryly. No, Ragnar corrected, while making them think we're somewhere we're not. Vikings learned long ago, if you can't fight everyone, make them fight each other. Chaos is a weapon. ISA leaned forward, interested. What do you mean? We split into 3 teams, Ragnar explained, his tactical vision crystallizing. Team 1, the loud one, attacks the bridge. Makes noise, draws attention. Every alarm, every stormtrooper, every officer responds to defend the bridge because that's what matters in their thinking. Team 2 plants explosives throughout the ship, not to destroy it, but to create more confusion. Fires, hull breaches, make them think they're under massive assault. And Team 3, the quiet one, gets to the cargo hold while everyone's distracted, secures the Beskar, and calls for extraction. Jemus studied the plan, and slowly, his scarred face split into a predatory grin. You know what you're describing? Classic Mandalorian Beskar Gam strategy. Iron skin tactics. Small teams, maximum chaos, surgical objectives. But with a Viking twist. He looked at his clan members. I think it could work. Could work? Floki cackled. It's brilliant. It's insane. It's everything the Empire won't expect. Because they're too busy thinking about proper military doctrine to imagine raiders who learned their craft attacking monasteries. Over the next week, they prepared. The Vikings learned to operate in vacuum using Mandalorian suits, not comfortable, but survivable. They practiced the insertion approach in simulators, learning how to mag clamp to a moving ship's hull and cut through military-grade durasteel. They memorized Star Destroyer layouts until they could navigate blind, and they learned Imperial protocols, how stormtroopers communicated, how officers thought, how the ship's crew would respond to various threats. Knowledge that Vikings had always valued. Knowing your enemy made killing them easier. The night before the raid, Ragnar stood on Clan Rook's compound balcony, looking up at Mandalore's stars. Lothbrok joined him, her own Beskar armor, painted with designs that honored both shield maidens and Mandalorian warriors. Do you miss it? She asked quietly. Norway. The old ways. The simple raids. Every day, Ragnar admitted. But I don't regret this. We're still Vikings. We just raid different seas now. He turned to her. Do you? I miss knowing the rules, Lothbrok replied. Back home, we knew who our enemies were. Kings and earls and Christian priests. Here, everything's more complicated. Empire, rebels, Mandalorians, who are allies but also test us constantly. Criminal syndicates. It's exhausting. It's also opportunity, Ragnar countered. In Norway, we were raiders hitting wealthy targets but never able to hold power. Here, he gestured at the compound, at the starships, at the galaxy beyond. Here, we could become something more. Not just raiders, not just mercenaries, but a force that matters. As Mandalorians? Lothbrok asked. Or as Vikings? Both, Ragnar said firmly. Jemus was right. Mandalorian is a creed, not a replacement for who we were. We can honor Thor and Odin while following the Risolnair. We can be Vikings who choose to become Mandalorian, keeping the best of both. Bjorn approached, interrupting the moment. Father, the teams are assembled. We're ready. The raid began at 0300 hours, coordinated with the Star Destroyer's shift change when alertness was lowest. 30 warriors, 15 Vikings, 15 Mandalorians, launched from Mandalore in 3 unmarked transports that looked like civilian cargo haulers. They rendezvoused in the asteroid field, powered down to minimal signatures, and waited. The inexorable passed on schedule, its massive bulk blotting out stars. Ragnar watched it approach from his transport's viewport and marveled at the scale. This was a ship designed to project Imperial might, to intimidate worlds into submission, and they were about to board it with axes and attitude. Teams, Ragnar transmitted on the secure channel. Remember, we're not here to win a war. We're here to steal their treasure and make them afraid. Vikings don't fight fair, we fight to win. Mandalorians don't take prisoners, we complete the mission. Today we're both. The transports accelerated silently, using the Star Destroyer's own mass to mask their approach. When they were close enough, warriors in vacuum-rated Beskar launched from the transports using jetpacks, crossing the final distance like ancient Viking berserkers charging across a beach. Only this beach was the void of space, and the monastery was a kilometer-long war machine. Ragnar's mag clamps attached to the hull with a satisfying thunk he felt through his armor. Around him, 29 other warriors did the same, spread across the Star Destroyer's dorsal surface like parasites on a whale. He activated his plasma cutter and began carving through the hull. Team 1, begin approach to bridge, he commanded. Team 2, start planting charges. Team 3, with me to cargo hold. And remember, Oi Amanda, Kanujurkadir Shah Mandawade. The Mandalorian war cry translated roughly to eternal souls. Don't mess with Mandalorians. But in Ragnar's mind, he heard it differently. For glory, for Valhalla, for the raid. The hull breached. Alarm screamed, and 30 warriors poured into the Star Destroyer like Vikings descending on a Saxon village, except these Vikings wore Beskar, carried blasters alongside axes, and had 6 months of Mandalorian training behind their ancient fury. The Empire was about to learn what happened when you mixed Norse raiding tactics with Mandalorian efficiency. It wouldn't be pretty. It wouldn't be by the book, but it would definitely be memorable. Ragnar dropped through the breach into a maintenance corridor, his axe in one hand and blaster in the other, ready to show the galaxy what DHA Cardo meant. The raid had begun. The maintenance corridor of the inexorable had never been designed with repelling borders in mind. When Ragnar and 9 warriors dropped through the hull breach, the single maintenance tech present barely had time to register what was happening before Rollo's axe sent him to whatever afterlife the Empire promised its servants. Team 3, we're in, Ragnar transmitted, moving to objective. Through his helmet's HUD, a technology Floki had helped him learn to use. Ragnar could see the other team's positions. Team 1, led by Bjorn, was already causing chaos near the bridge section. Explosions bloomed on his tactical display as Team 2 planted charges throughout the ship. Everything was going according to plan, which meant something would go wrong soon. Vikings knew better than to trust smooth raids. They moved through the corridors with practiced efficiency, Mandalorian tactical doctrine, combined with Viking raiding instincts. 2 warriors ahead as scouts, the main group moving fast but not reckless. 2 warriors covering the rear. When they encountered stormtroopers, the engagement was brutal and quick, blaster fire from range to pin them, then close for melee kill strikes before they could regroup. Vikings had learned that stormtrooper armor was tough but had gaps, and a well-placed axe strike still killed. Contact ahead, Lager called out. A full squad of stormtroopers, 12 strong, had responded to the intrusion alarm. They'd established a firing position at a corridor intersection, using cover and overlapping fields of fire. Textbook Imperial Doctrine, which was why Ragnar had already planned for it. Floki, smoke. The shipbuilder, now warrior, tossed several Mandalorian smoke grenades. The corridor filled with dense gray vapor that sensors couldn't penetrate effectively. The stormtroopers fired blindly into the smoke, their shots hitting walls and ceiling, but nothing vital. Then the Vikings were on them. Ragnar had learned that stormtroopers trained for ranged combat and urban warfare, but they didn't train for enemies who emerged from smoke like demons, who fought with axes and swords while their armor was designed to stop blasters. His axe found the gap between helmet and chest plate on the first trooper. Lajurtha's sword drove up under another's chin. Rollo simply grabbed a stormtrooper by the helmet and twisted until the neck inside broke. 12 stormtroopers, dead in under 20 seconds. Team 3 kept moving. The ship's internal alarms were going insane now. Red lights flashed. Automated warnings blared in BASIC about hull breaches. Fire, intruders at the bridge. Ragnar could hear the chaos through the walls. Running feet shouted orders. The deep vibration of the ship's systems responding to crisis. All teams report, Ragnar commanded. Team 1 engaged at bridge. Bjorn's voice came back, strained with combat. Heavy resistance, but holding. They're throwing everything at us. Team 2, charges placed, ISA reported. Creating additional breaches now. Half the ship thinks they're being boarded by a fleet. Perfect. The Empire's overwhelming response to threats was actually working. Against them, they were concentrating forces where Team 1 was making noise, leaving other areas more vulnerable. Team 3 reached the cargo hold entrance. 2 more stormtroopers guarded it. Both died before they could raise their weapons. Floki worked on the door controls, while the others established a defensive perimeter. Ragnar, Jemus's voice crackled through the comm. We're reading massive troop movement toward your position. They've figured out you're the real threat. Of course they had. The Empire wasn't stupid, brutal and predictable, but not stupid. Eventually, they'd realize the bridge attack was a diversion and secure the valuable cargo. Ragnar had counted on having maybe 5 minutes before that happened. By his internal count, they'd used 4. Floki status? Almost there. The door hissed open, revealing the cargo hold. Rows of containers stretched into the distance. And among them, gleaming even in the harsh overhead lights, were crates marked with Mandalorian script, Beskar ingots, hundreds of tons of the galaxy's most valuable metal. Secure the Beskar, Ragnar ordered. Rollo, set charges. On anything else of value, we're not leaving the Empire with a profit here. His warriors moved with efficiency born of months of training. Mag clamps attached to Beskar crates. Demolition charges placed on Imperial supplies. They had perhaps 3 minutes before the stormtroopers breached the cargo hold in overwhelming numbers. Extraction vessels, Ragnar called. We're ready for pickup. Blow the hull now. Outside the Star Destroyer, the Mandalorian extraction ships fired precisely targeted shots at the hull above the cargo hold. Not enough to cause catastrophic damage, but enough to create an opening to space. The cargo hold's atmosphere rushed out in a violent decompression, but Ragnar's warriors were sealed in. Vacuum-rated armor and mag-clamped to the Beskar. Crates they'd come to steal. The Beskar, pulled by the decompression, and then by tractor beams from the extraction vessels, began moving toward the breach. Ragnar and his team rode it like ancient Vikings riding a river current. Except this current was screaming atmosphere and debris, and the river led to the void. Team 1, Team 2, extract now. Ragnar commanded. Mission accomplished. The extraction was chaos. Teams 1 and 2 fought their way to designated hull breaches while Mandalorian ships provided covering fire against TIE fighters scrambling from the Star Destroyer's hangars. Bjorn's team lost 2 warriors in the retreat. Both died holding a corridor so others could escape, dying with weapons in hand, just as Vikings believed honored warriors should. Team 2 detonated their charges during extraction, and secondary explosions rippled through the inexorable. Not enough to destroy the massive ship, but enough to cripple it, force it to make emergency repairs, leave it vulnerable and humiliated. And Team 3? They flew through space riding Beskar crates like they were longships on cosmic seas. Mag-clamped to stolen treasure while extraction vessels picked them up one by one. It was insane. It was reckless. It was exactly the kind of thing that would become legend. When the last warrior was recovered and the ships jumped to hyperspace, the inexorable was left listing, damaged and missing its cargo. The Empire would have questions. The crew would have no good answers. And somewhere in their reports, they'd have to admit they'd been raided by warriors using tactics from before the Republic even existed. The celebration on Mandalore was everything a Viking victory feast should be: loud, drunken, full of boasting and song. But it was also Mandalorian, which meant it carried undertones of honor, respect for fallen comrades, and the quiet satisfaction of a mission completed with precision. Ragnar sat with Jemus and the clan leaders, watching his Vikings, no, his Dha Karta, celebrate alongside Mandalorians as equals. They'd earned that, proven themselves in the only way that mattered, through successful combat. You did well, Jemus admitted, raising a cup of Ini Tra Gal, Mandalorian black ale that could strip paint. Better than well. That raid will be studied in clan training for years. Unconventional insertion, maximum chaos, surgical extraction. You've added something to Mandalorian doctrine, Viking innovation. We learned from you, Ragnar replied, though he accepted the compliment. Vikings believed in boasting when boasting was earned. But yes, we added our own flavor. Raiding monasteries, raiding star destroyers, the principle's the same. Hit hard, take the treasure, leave before they organize. The Empire will respond, Jemus warned. They can't let this stand. A successful raid on a star destroyer? By primitives wearing Mandalorian armor? It makes them look weak. Good, Ragnar said simply. Let them come. We'll be ready. But even as he said it, Ragnar felt the weight of leadership that had always followed him. 2 Vikings dead in the raid. How many more would die in the Empire's response? How many more would fall? Learning to survive in this galaxy of impossible scale and casual brutality? Lager found him later, after the celebration had devolved into the kind of drunken revelry that transcended culture. You're thinking too much, she observed, sitting beside him. Dangerous habit for a raider. I'm thinking about cost, Ragnar admitted. In Norway, we lost warriors to Saxon swords and bad weather. Here, we lose them to weapons that burn through armor, to enemies who can rain death from orbit, to a scale of warfare I'm still struggling to comprehend. He looked at her. Sometimes I wonder if I led our people to glory or to elaborate suicide. You led us to purpose, Lager countered. Yes, we might die here, but we were going to die eventually anyway. That's the nature of being mortal. At least here, we die doing what Vikings do best, raiding, fighting, writing our names in history through deeds that echo. She gestured at the celebrating warriors. Look at them. They're not just surviving, they're thriving. We found a place in this galaxy, not as victims, not as curiosities, but as warriors who matter. Bjorn approached, his young face flushed with victory and ale. Father, the Mandalorians are teaching me about bounty hunting. They say a good warrior can make a fortune tracking down criminals and fugitives across the galaxy. It's like raiding, but someone pays you to do it. Ragnar couldn't help but smile. His son, always eager for the next adventure. And this interests you? Father, we could hunt the most dangerous targets in the galaxy. Build a reputation. The Mandalorians say some bounty hunters are as famous as generals. Bjorn's enthusiasm was infectious. We could be Viking bounty hunters, Dha Karta, who track prey across the stars. It was an interesting thought. Vikings had always been adaptable, farmers who became raiders, raiders who became traders, traders who became kings. Why not bounty hunters? It was just another form of pursuing valuable targets, only with less emphasis on monasteries and more on individuals. We'll consider it, Ragnar said. But first, we survive what comes next. The Empire won't forget this raid. They'll come for vengeance, for pride, to show that primitives can't embarrass the emperors. Forces without consequence. He was right. 3 weeks later, the Empire came. An entire fleet, 6 star destroyers, dozens of support craft, and thousands of stormtroopers. They blockaded Mandalore, demanding the surrender of the warriors who'd raided the inexorable. They wanted Ragnar, wanted his Vikings, wanted to make an example that would echo across every world that might think to defy imperial authority. The Mandalorians refused. Not because they loved Vikings, though by now many clans had accepted Ragnar's people as siblings in arms, but because Mandalorians didn't surrender their own to outsiders, ever. It was part of the Risol Nair, part of what made them Mandalorian. The standoff lasted days. The Empire threatened orbital bombardment. Mandalore armed every warrior, prepared for war. And Ragnar stood in the clan council chambers, watching powers beyond his complete understanding maneuver for advantage, knowing that his raid, his decision, had brought this crisis. I should surrender, Ragnar said quietly to Jemus. One life to prevent war. That's wisdom, isn't it? That's cowardice, Jemus replied bluntly. And it wouldn't prevent war, it would invite it. The Empire would see Mandalore abandoning its warriors and press for more concessions. No, we fight or we don't. But we don't surrender our own. In the end, the crisis resolved not through violence, but through Mandalorian pragmatism. Clan leaders negotiated with Imperial diplomats. Credits changed hands, enough to cover the Besker's value plus damages to the inexorable. Face was saved on both sides. The Empire got compensation. Mandalore kept its warriors and its honor. But everyone knew the truth. The Empire had blinked first. They'd back down rather than face the cost of fighting Mandalore over a handful of primitive raiders. That was victory of a sort, not the glorious battle Vikings might have preferred, but the kind of victory that let you raid again another day. We're notorious now, Lagerthe observed as the Imperial fleet withdrew. The Vikings who embarrassed a Star Destroyer. That's fame, Ragnar. The kind that brings opportunity and danger in equal measure. She was right. Over the following months, as word spread through the Outer Rim about Dha Karta warriors who combined ancient tactics with modern technology, opportunities came. Mandalorian clans hired them for difficult missions. Criminal syndicates offered contracts. Even some rebel cells reached out, interested in warriors who'd proven they could hurt the Empire using unconventional methods. Ragnar accepted some offers, declined others. He was learning to navigate this galaxy's politics, understanding. That reputation was currency. That choosing your battles mattered more than fighting all of them. That sometimes the best raid was the one you turned down. His Vikings, now truly Dha Karta, having taken Mandalorian oaths while keeping their Norse hearts, spread across several clans. Some became bounty hunters, as Bjorn had suggested. Others became mercenaries, selling their skills to those who could afford. Viking ferocity tempered with Mandalorian discipline. A few even joined the rebellion, seeing in the fight against the Empire echoes of their own battles against oppressive kings. Floki did something unexpected. He became a shipwright for Clan Ren, adapting his understanding of longships to help design new Mandalorian vessels. It's all the same, he explained to Ragnar with his characteristic cackle. Wood or metal, sails or engines, ships carry warriors to battle. That's what matters. And Ragnar himself? He'd become something he'd never imagined back in Norway. A leader whose legend spanned galaxies instead of just kingdoms. Vikings told stories about him on Mandalore and beyond, how he'd led his people through a storm between worlds, how he'd adapted to an impossible new reality, how he'd proven that old ways could survive in new times. But late at night, when celebrations ended and responsibilities weighed heavy, Ragnar wondered about the cost. They'd lost 40 warriors since arriving in this galaxy, some to combat, some to accidents with technology they didn't fully understand, some to choices that proved fatal in ways they couldn't have anticipated. Do you regret it? Rollo asked him once, catching him in one of these contemplative moments. Accepting Jemus's offer? Becoming Mandalorian? Leading us down this path? Ragnar considered the question honestly. Did he regret leading his people into a galaxy where death came from weapons they'd never imagined, where the scale of warfare made their legendary raids look small, where they'd had to change everything they were just to survive? No, he decided. We're still Vikings. We still raid. We still fight with courage and die with honor. We've just learned to do it across the stars instead of across seas. He looked at his brother. Better this than growing old in Norway, dying in bed, forgotten. At least here, our names will echo. At least here we matter. Valhalla or the stars, Rollo said, raising his cup. Either way, we die as Vikings. Either way, Ragnar agreed, we die free. The legend of Ragnar Lothbrok and the Dha Karta would spread across the Outer Rim in the years that followed, becoming a story that Mandalorians, smugglers, and even some Imperials told in hushed tones. How Viking raiders from another reality had arrived through a storm of the gods, learned to walk among the stars, and proven that warrior spirit transcended time, technology, and universe itself. Some Vikings remained with Mandalorian clans, their descendants eventually forgetting they'd ever been anything but Mandalorian, though their clan symbols always carried hints of dragon heads and Thor's hammer. Others became legendary bounty hunters, Their combination of ancient tactics and modern weapons making them sought after and feared across the galaxy. A few found their way to the rebellion, bringing Viking fury to the fight against tyranny. Ragnar himself would die 5 years after arriving in the Star Wars galaxy, not in bed, not in chains, but fighting alongside Clan Rook against a massive Imperial assault on a rebel base. He fell with an axe in one hand and a blaster in the other, surrounded by the bodies of stormtroopers who'd learned too late what it meant to face a Viking who'd learned to fight among the stars. His last words, transmitted across the battlefield, were simple: "We die as we lived, raiding new shores." The Mandalorians gave him a warrior's funeral, cremating his body in Beskar armor painted with Norse runes and Mandalorian symbols, a perfect merger of who he'd been and who he'd become. And in the flames, some swore they saw Valkyries riding alongside Mandalorian spirits, come to carry a warrior who'd belonged to both mythologies home. The galaxy never forgot the Vikings. Long after the Empire fell, long after the rebellion became the New Republic, stories persisted of the Dha Karta, the forgotten warriors, who'd proven that some things, courage, honor, the warrior's spirit, existed beyond any single universe. They'd been raiders from the seas of Earth who'd learned to raid the seas of space. And in doing so, they'd earned immortality. Ragnar Lothbrok had wanted to matter, to have his deeds echo through eternity. In the end, he'd gotten his wish, not just across one world, but across an entire galaxy far, far away.